So yeah, late diagnosed ADHD. And what I'd like to start with is why are labels important? And there's a quote, and it basically says, this is to those who have neurodivergent children, say they don't want to put a limit by putting labels on them. And she said, before I knew I was neurodivergent, my labels were stubborn, lazy, rebellious, difficult, stupid, flake, and dumb. And so that's why labels are really important, because I was a little bit more late diagnosed ADHD. And, before you have those labels, it's a different label. And that's why they matter. And I wanted to start out, and if you want to type in the comments when you're diagnosed, and this could be formal or self-diagnosed, that could be helpful for people to see. And this topic was great because this week, as I've been traveling, I just kept having remembering certain labels that were put on me as a kid, or just growing up before I had a label. And one thing that I was called more than most was selfish. It's all about you. You only focus on yourself. That's something that I've been told time and time again by teachers, some family, in relationships, and one in particular, and I'll tell you why, because it's taken me so long to realize I'm not selfish. That's not what it's about. And the memory that came back to me this week, because you have a lot of time to think when you're driving, right? I'm on the ADHD tour, was being in art class and the teacher in front of the whole classroom saying, Tyler, the world doesn't revolve around you. And the reason for that was I wanted the lights to be a little bit more dim, and I wanted the music to be turned down. Because I'm also on the autism spectrum, and it was overstimulating, and I couldn't do artwork. And I didn't know that. We didn't have a label. I actually didn't find out I had autism until 4 or 5 months ago. So I've gone my whole life thinking that I was selfish. And so trying, and I'm not, and then saying is this selfish? Is this selfish? How do I do this? And so what happens is you actually don't have boundaries, and you actually don't take care of yourself because you're so scared of being selfish. And so that's what I want to say. I mean, there's so many labels that we carry before we have ADHD, before we have the autism, before you have dyslexia. It's oh man, I'm dumb, or I don't get stuff, or I'm selfish. I don't know how, but somehow it's coming across that way. So I need to work on it. Maybe it's a gap for me. And so a lot of us probably have these pieces or these labels about ourselves, and some of it we might not even know that we think is true and we think it's who we are, and it's not true at all. Because neurodivergence can show up certain ways, maybe we don't care because we forgot a birthday, or maybe we're too overstimulated so we couldn't stay that long, or we weren't that present because we were trying to calm it down, and then it looks like we're not that present in life, or we forget stuff, or it's there's so many labels that happen without this. And so if you're a late diagnosed ADHD human like myself, and some much later than me, there's a unpacking of all of the things that you think you are, those negative things that you actually aren't. And the label ADHD can help do that. One woman, I remember 85 years old, that I talked to, said that it took off 85 years of shame off her shoulders. And so that's why labels matter. And that's why it's really important to have a name for it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more, and then I'm going to go through the stages of late ADHD diagnosis. This is by an ADHD center in the UK, and I thought it was brilliant. And so I want to go through those. And so a couple more things with late diagnosed ADHD. Low self-esteem is very common. Totally right here, low self-esteem, thinking, or just this feeling that something's wrong with you. Even when you get a name for it, even when you acknowledge it, if you've been going your whole life without a label, there's there's something inside of you that feels like an alien. I used to say I was an alien when I was a teenager. I thought I was an alien. I knew I wasn't. Maybe I was reincarnated. And so pay attention to those pieces of you that feel like they're not enough, or maybe you don't belong, because it could be that you're past that, and yet those are still there because it happened during development, and so we get to do that differently. So when those come up, one thing that a therapist has really taught me is to ask what that part of us needs, the part that thinks we don't fit, or we don't belong, or we're different, or something's wrong with us, or we're falling short. It's what does that kid part of us need to hear to soothe them? And that's what can really help you heal. And sometimes it's kind of in layers, and so low self-esteem is very, very common. And when you have low self-esteem, you don't advocate for yourself. You might choose situations that aren't great for you, people, relationships, jobs. It's because if you don't feel good enough, you might feel like you should settle, or that's the best you're going to get, or something like that. And when you get higher self-esteem and you start to work on this stuff, things can really shift for sure. So 80% of people are undiagnosed. And so congrats on being on the call. You're in the 20% that have an awareness of this, that aren't stuck in the same way, that don't think something's wrong with them. So congratulations for being in the 20%. And that is part of my mission. It's like, let's go find the other 80%. That's part of it, because I can't sleep at night thinking there are other people out there. You are more likely to get undiagnosed if in a couple different populations. So if you're the inattentive type, so there's 3 types of ADHD. The first one is a hyperactive type. That's your more stereotypical, can't sit still, restless, right, impatient, see fidgeting. And then your inattentive type is going to be all of that outside energy, except the body's calm and it's more internal. That one's more common in women, not all women. It's just more common. That one doesn't present as hyperactive. And then you have the combination type. So it's a mix of 2. And over 75% of us are a mix of 2. I have both as well. So to give you an example, my best friend that I grew up with since I was in 2nd grade has ADHD. We sent her to somebody who has ADHD on their psychiatrist who does evaluations, and she comes back from an appointment and she says, she doesn't think I have ADHD, and she said she could do the test, but she thinks it's something else. She hits everything on the DSM, and she's the inattentive type. And so we got a second opinion, and that person was wrong. So it might also be that you literally go to somebody who has ADHD on their website and you don't get diagnosed. And it blows my mind, because even somebody who's worked in mental health for years, worked with ADHD, I specialize in this, is you can't tell ADHD by talking to somebody for 30 minutes. The thing that a lot of us with late diagnosed ADHD do is what's called masking. So masking is doing things to hide your symptoms, and there's a very good chance that you've done it subconsciously as well. So masking, you're going to cover things up. You might be extra early to overcompensate for being late, or you might come up with excuses. You might put twice the effort, or try to overcompensate by working so hard, or maybe trying to achieve a goal. You might be working extra hard right before deadlines, check your work multiple times so you don't make mistakes, focus intensely on conversations, trying to keep up, taking notes, being extra early, having multiple alarms, reminders set up, writing everything down, trying to be quiet in conversations or extra cautious with your words, suppressing your energy to feel calm, which, by the way, if you suppress that energy, it's got to go somewhere, and a lot of times it can turn into anxiety. So if you're masking a lot of your symptoms, if you're pretending you don't have them, anxiety is really common, and it can ease up when you stop holding all of that in and back. Suppressing the urge to fidget or skim, meaning holding something that kind of gives you movement, or rocking back and forth, or whatever that looks like to you. It could be just sitting up, standing, tapping your feet, whatever that is. And then bottling strong emotions up. So we can have strong emotions. We feel big. Some of us really do. And so bottling those up. So those are some examples of masking. They can cause depression. It can cause anxiety. It can cause a lot of things, because you're really just holding who you are back. That's really what it is. And so a lot of us are experts at masking our symptoms. We are experts because we had to. And as a kid in school, when you can't sit still, or you forget something, or you do something, you get reprimanded very quickly. And so you learn very quickly that you got to hide it. You got to hide it. These comments are incredible. These are wonderful comments. And we can talk about that as I get through the content here. And I have 20 minutes left, so I do 30 minutes of content and then 30 minutes of Q&A. This comment box is amazing. So lots of good stuff in there. Masking is something really big. We've had this question before, is how do I know if it's me or if I'm masking? And so here's a good way to know. Think of how it feels, because we also want to speak to somebody in a way that they can understand it. We're not going to go on a listing appointment and, walk and move all around and act like we're not interested. So in a way, we might kind of be masking, but really it's more about being intentional. So masking is going to cause emotional distress. That's how you know if you're masking. It can cause emotional distress. If you're sitting in a training or meeting for 2 hours and you are dying inside, instead of getting up and going for a walk and taking a break, even if you think you maybe shouldn't, or whatever, you are masking because you've got more energy. We have our brains are understimulated, so it's trying to regulate. It's trying to help you. It's trying to get up and move. So masking doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel authentic. It's going to cause emotional distress. It could be little. It could be big. But that's some ways how you know that you might be masking if you're covering up who you are or what you want to do, instead of, you might be mirror and matching or what's appropriate for the situation because you're choosing that. Masking feels a little bit different. So the inattentive type, that one is more likely to be undiagnosed. Women are often undiagnosed, or it's said, oh, it's depression or hormones, or you just had a baby, or maybe it's anxiety or bipolar, misdiagnosed. I won't even start on that. So if you're a minority, you are less likely to be diagnosed as well. You may not have, and we're going to get someone in here to talk a little bit about the intersectionality of neurodivergence and being a person of color and being a minority, because that's really important because there are some extra barriers in there sometimes as well. Older generations, the newer generations we get, the more people are getting diagnosed and recognized. So if you're in an older generation and you may not have had a word for it at all, right? Or it may have been dismissed or a joke or something like that. And then lower income, if you don't have access to resources, if your parents had lower income or you had lower income, that's another one as well. Yes, and multiple diagnoses, and then trauma, because there's some commonalities between trauma and ADHD. And if you've had a lot of trauma, sometimes ADHD goes undiagnosed because of that, or if you already have depression, or if you already have anxiety, things like that. So there's a lot of reasons for it to go undiagnosed. So now I want to go through, these are 5 stages of grief with the diagnosis, and then I'm going to add a 6th one on there that's about thriving, and so I'll share more with that. So the getting a diagnosis is not just, okay, you have a diagnosis, okay, move on. There's integration and kind of processing what that means for you, and that's really, really normal. It's really normal to have that process. So the first one is denial. That is the first stage in this ADHD grief process when you're getting your late diagnosis. That is denial. That's really common. I don't know if I really have it. Maybe I just kind of connect with the community, or maybe this makes sense, but I don't know if I have it, or I don't know if I have it severe enough. And this could go for a formal diagnosis or a self-diagnosis. You don't have to get a formal diagnosis. Self-diagnosis is valid unless you want medication, then you'll have to go get a formal diagnosis. The thing is, if the coping strategies and the things around ADHD help you, that's all that matters. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter if you officially score high enough to have it or not, especially in our group. You don't even have to have it to benefit from this stuff. So denial is the first one, though, and that's the initial reaction is kind of going back, well, maybe it's trauma, or maybe it's just, depression, or maybe, I'm a little immature, or maybe I just have a lot of energy. This is where you're going to deny it. Or maybe I'm just making an excuse, and actually I'm trying to, make an excuse because I'm actually lazy, instead of, no, I actually have this, and this is hard for me, or this is harder for me. So denial is very common, and that's, the stages of grief, because it really is, when you get a late diagnosis, it's not uncommon to feel like grief for a multitude of reasons. And grief could be, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't know this my whole life. It would have been so much easier if I knew. Or, some people start medication and they say, oh my gosh, is this what it's like for other people? Like, it's this easy and it's been this hard for me. And so my therapist used to say, you gotta feel to heal. You gotta feel to heal. And so whatever emotions come up, if you need time to grieve, don't judge it. Let that flow. Otherwise, you're just going to stay stuck. It's really about allowing that and accepting that. The other thing with denial is there's stigma around ADHD. There still is, and I think we're changing that. And I know we are. There's stigma, and so some people don't want that because it's, oh, squirrel, or you can't sit still, or you're immature, or whatever. And the other side of ADHD has really not come to the public, spotlight quite as much of how, no, our brains work really different and there's really neat things and all of these great things about it still can have a stigma. So denial at first is very, very common and very normal. The second one is anger. So this one's anger. So this can be for a multitude of reasons. It can be that, you know, now you have a name and it's like, why did I have to struggle so hard? And there was this here that I could, you know, could have known, and I had to live my whole life like this. You know, this was hard. And there can be anger at teachers. It could be anger at your parents. Even if they didn't do anything wrong, don't judge your anger. Anger is not a negative thing, especially working in mental health. Emotions are not, there's not good and bad emotions. Emotions just are. And when you ruminate on stuff and you take actions that are not good towards other people, that's when it's not good. But sadness, anger, you know, that kind of stuff, they're not good or, you know, positive or negative. They just are, you know. So yeah, that's really important to know that it's okay to feel angry. And you don't have to tell people to get closure on that, you know. And you might go back and you might have memories come back that you need to process and kind of integrate. Because when you do get a diagnosis, you are going to integrate it in kind of into your psyche. And now the story you had about your childhood might shift a little bit. You might have a different lens on there, and that takes time. So it's okay to feel angry about this. You also might have like a sense of remorse, you know. There might be family members who doubted ADHD, or there might be a teacher who recommended it, but your parents decided not to do testing because they didn't want you to have a label and they thought that's what's best for you, and it would have been extremely helpful, or teachers who misunderstood you, or people who blamed you, you know. Or you might just feel, I mean, I felt this. I felt angry, like at points like, this is really hard. Like, why? Why is this hard? Why is it so hard for me to remember stuff? Why is being on time so hard for me? It's like this, it's like a learning disability, you know? And there's great things to ADHD. And what I'm talking about now is letting yourself grieve the things that are hard. And so I've felt angry over the blocks in my brain as to why time is so hard for me to gauge. And it always will be. I mean, at 36 years old, I've got tools, I've got accommodations, I'm on time now, and I've got to work on it. And that's part of it. You know, it's part of it. And you get to a place of peace, by the way, which is one of these stages. So the first one is, and somebody asked for a graphic. Let's see. So let me I'll do a screen share because that's a really good point. So I'm going to do a screen share just to give this visual. And thank you for speaking up. So again, if there's accommodations or things that you need, I want to hear those. So this is the first stage of denial. And I will include this article in the notes. So we just went through anger. At least she's very angry. Okay, so the next one is going to be bargaining. So bargaining, this is where you're going to start looking for solutions, right? You also in this stage, and they don't write this in here, in bargaining, you might be saying, well, maybe it's just because I, you know, have this going on and it'll get better, you know, or maybe I do this, or maybe I kind of going back and forth and kind of, I kind of like bargaining the diagnosis if there's ways to do that. And then you're also going to be, or ways to like remediate it or cure it. You might also be, because you've known that you have it, you're not in denial, but you might be looking for articles like how to cure ADHD, or Dr. Gaber Mate is one that has some good stuff about other stuff, and he's also got some not great stuff. And I've had some people send stuff over. So great doctor, but some of his research is on his studies only and not a bunch of other studies around ADHD. And there was a point at time where he said trauma is what causes ADHD, so you can heal ADHD. And so this can be a stage where if you haven't, there's like part of you that wants to heal it, which we don't need to heal it. Our brains are really great. But you might be looking for ways that secret way to do it, or that guru out there that might have an answer. By the way, Gaber Mate's got some good stuff, just not on ADHD in some aspects. But some stuff, he's got some good stuff. Also, you might be saying, wow, this takes long. You know, this is taking too long. I want to get better at this faster. Next one is depression. So this is normal too, to have depression. You've gone through treatment, you've accepted it, you've kind of bargained, you're at a place And then and you're not angry anymore. It can be kind of this depression. So for some, anger can be a secondary emotion, not always, but sometimes, where it's really hiding this depression and sadness and I think that's what mine was. I was so angry that it was like this. And really, I was sad. I was sad that, my brain couldn't gauge time, or that things were harder for me. And so depression is normal, or it can feel like certain things are harder, or maybe there's some that say, I don't have a superpower in this. Some people do, and I've heard that too. It's like, I don't feel like I have a superpower. So it's allowing these feelings, because they will pass. They really will. And then acceptance. So you will get to this, and the stage that you will spend the longest time in is this acceptance and peace. And then the next one, I'll say number 6, would be thriving. So these are short-lived. If you're in one of these right now, if you're letting yourself feel these, the denial, short-lived. The anger, if you let yourself feel, you're going to move through that. The bargaining, you'll move through that. Depression, that will lift. If you have chronic diagnosed depression, that's different. But the depression around this, that is short-lived. It will pass. It really will. So the next one is that acceptance. And that's where you come to a peace. And it's like, hey, this is the way my brain is, and you might jump back to some of the other places, the 5 stages at certain times. You might go back in depression sometimes, or you might be good for a couple of years and you'll have a moment where you get angry for a little bit. That's normal too. Most of us go through that. So this place of acceptance, and you start to advocate for yourself, you start to accept parts of yourself, and it's just, you start to integrate it into your psyche. So those are the 5 stages of grief with ADHD. And then the 6th one I want to say that's not on that article that I see all the time as a coach is thriving. Oh my goodness. Because a lot of us, the reason things felt hard is because we were playing the neurotypical game. Right? We were trying to do things the neurotypical way, the way that people told us to. And so when you come to a place of acceptance and you understand how your brain works, now it's going to be different, because you're gonna do things different. You're going to have like a kind of feeling relief. You're going to let go a lot of the shame. You're going to feel a lot of freedom, a lot of peace. You might even help, your parents or spouse now get it. You're teaching them, and now they don't take it personally. They understand why. You might even help your parents get diagnosed. We've had that happen already too, because if you have ADHD, there's a 50% chance your parents have ADHD. So this thriving, and this is what we're doing with this, is like what I'd like to do, and what I'm doing with the tour, is teaching you how to thrive with your brain, because we also have that ability to spend, way longer, or hyper focus on things long after somebody else is tired, right? A neurodivergent person. The other thing that's really interesting is over half, from our small sample survey, over half of our agents in Keller Williams that are in the top 100 in the company, in the world for KW, over half from our small sample survey reported having ADHD. Over half. So the top agents in the world, the majority have ADHD. And what's really interesting is I've coached in the past people without ADHD. And with ADHD, we compare ourselves to people who don't have it sometimes. Like, oh man, how can they read for 15 minutes every day and then do this every day and do 15, this kind of stuff. There's also the flip side, is that we have people without ADHD, and they are comparing themselves to agents in the top 100 in the world with KW of, why can't I focus that hard? Why am I not that passionate? How do they have so much energy? So there's a flip side where you have people without ADHD who are comparing themselves to you and feeling like they're falling short. And I think that's important to remember, that it's when you are embracing who you are and you've gone through these stages of grief, and now you're really aware of where your shortcomings are, you hire people, you find people who love to make sure you stay on time. My assistant texts me every day, like 30 minutes before this call, to let me know I have this call, just in case I got so lost in something, even though I set alarms, And so you might have a team around you that loves to do this stuff and is really good at those other things, and you keep yourself in your lane. And that's where the thriving is, because we have, as I said, more creativity. That's something they showed in studies as a whole. More risk-taking, more entrepreneurial, calm under pressure. We can really think outside the box. 10 times the amount of thoughts as someone without ADHD. There's so many really neat things to how our brain is formed, and it's just formed different. And it's 3 to 10% of the population has ADHD. And so, of course, they're not going to build a world around 3 to 10%. They're going to build it around 90 to 97% of the population. And so that's why it feels so crappy, is because it's not built for us. Yet if the world was built for ADHD, we would be good. And so acceptance is really important. And that's where you really get to thrive. And you can start building your world around yourself and your brain, and really come into your own for the first time. Really start working with it. Stop playing the neurotypical game, starting to feel really empowered. You're getting your energy back, you're reversing burnout, all of those things are happening, and you're finally getting a label or a name, and then you're finding community and connection. And so if you're late diagnosed ADHD, what I would say is, one, we want to embrace the brain, we want to figure out how you work. Another thing I've seen in coaching people with ADHD too is there are these certain things, these shortcomings that people think they have, and they think it's something wrong with them, and yet they're very coachable and they're trying hard. And when you look at patterns of, maybe you didn't do that thing because it actually wasn't the best thing, and you're super excited about this, or you're motivated by a different way, it's like pulling out the judgment and being curious. And really what I would say is figure out what is your joy zone. Stop doing the things you hate doing. Stop doing it. You don't have to. You don't have to lead you in a certain way. You don't have to read every day. You don't have to listen to 15 minutes of a podcast every day unless you want to. You really don't. So cut out all the noise unless it's getting you to your goal, and then you will really start to build a life around how you're wired. So that's the content I have. Those are the 5, and then the 6th one, I guess it's not 5 stages, it's the 5 stages of grief, and then the awesome part after, number 6, right? Once you get through the grieving process and the acceptance process and you integrate into your psyche, things get so much easier. They really, really do. They get happier, they get easier. Depression can lift, burnout lifts, your energy gets higher. We really want to understand your brain, completely embrace it. However long that takes you to kind of really get to acceptance, it's okay. And then we really want to build your world and your life around that. Thank you so much for coming today. Shoot me a message if you need any help, if you need anything. And we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for being here. And appreciate all of you.